picture this. You're standing in your side yard uh, looking at this massive slash pine,
Right.
and it's got a full canopy of green needles. It provides incredible shade during those brutal Florida summers, keeping the house cool. And honestly, it looks perfectly healthy.
Sure, to the naked eye,
Right. But beneath the soil, its structural anchor is just completely turned to mush.
which is terrifying.
Totally. Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are looking at the hidden dangers lurking in our own yards.
Yeah, the stuff you don't see.
Exactly. We are pulling insights from the Palmetto Homeowner's Guide to Safer Yards, which was put together by Tree Service Palmetto LFL. And our mission today is really to help you understand that, well, a dying tree does not care about your utility bills or how beautiful that summer shade looks.
It's a harsh truth, but an incredibly necessary one for you to confront. We look at a tree and we just see nature, right? Maybe a bit of landscaping?
Right, just a pretty part of the yard.
Exactly. But those trees are towering, multi-ton physical structures. So today, we have to look at the deceptive biology of dying trees, the intense mechanics of extreme weather, and honestly, the steep financial consequences of ignoring a hazard.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the first thing our source completely shatters is the illusion of a healthy tree.
Oh, absolutely.
We naturally assume that a tree with a full canopy of green leaves is perfectly fine. For a homeowner looking at a laurel oak covered in vibrant foliage, it defies logic to think that tree could be catastrophically failing.
It really does. It goes against our instincts.
Right. I read this and I honestly struggled with the basic biology of it. If the tree is technically dying or dead inside, how is it still pumping out all those green leaves?
What's fascinating here is it all comes down to how a tree is built. Think of a tree trunk like a massive bundle of drinking straws surrounding a solid wooden pillar.
Okay, drinking straws, I can picture that.
Right. So the outermost rings of the tree, the sapwood, they act as the plumbing system. That's what actively transports water and nutrients up to the canopy.
Ah,
But the inner core, the heartwood, is actually dead tissue. Its only job is structural support. It is essentially the skeleton.
oh wow. So the plumbing system can still be perfectly functional even if the internal skeleton is actively rotting away.
Exactly.
It's kind of like having a house where, the water runs fine, the sinks work, but termites have eaten all the load-bearing studs inside the walls.
Yes.
Like, you wouldn't know the house was about to collapse just by turning on the kitchen faucet.
That is the perfect way to look at it. The University of Florida IFS extension points out that wood decay fungi severely compromise the mechanical strength of the wood long before any visible cavities appear on the outside.
So by the time you see a hole,
By the time you actually see a hollowed out section in the trunk, yeah, that internal skeleton has already been failing for years. The fungi are in there digesting the lignin and cellulose, the very compounds that give wood its rigidity.
so the tree is actively tricking you because it's still pumping nutrients. You aren't looking at the base,
Yeah.
where the actual signs of catastrophic failure are hiding.
Right, you're just looking up at the pretty leaves.
Exactly. And the guide points out some red flags that I thought were wild, like finding mushrooms growing at the base of the trunk. I feel most people see mushrooms around an oak tree and just think, oh, neat, a little forest ecosystem in my yard.
Yeah, they think it's cute. But really, they are looking at the fruiting bodies of a massive infection.
Wait, really? Just the mushrooms?
Oh, yeah. Those mushrooms, or fungal punks as they're called, they don't just pop up out of nowhere. They are the visible tips of a massive underground and internal mycelial network. And that network is literally eating the mechanical support system of your tree. If you see conchs attached to the root flare or the lower trunk, you are looking at advanced internal decay. The structural integrity is already gone.
Okay, that is terrifying. And then the guide mentions an even more alarming visual. Cracks in the soil radiating out from the base of the tree. The source calls it root heaving.
Yes, root
I
heaving.
want to make sure I'm visualizing the mechanics of this correctly. This isn't just the ground drying out and cracking in the sun, right?
No, not at all.
This is the tree acting as a giant lever, and the root system is physically beginning to pull out of the dirt.
The leverage involved is staggering. A mature tree canopy catches a massive amount of wind. It acts just like a giant sail.
Right.
So the trunk is the lever arm, and the root system is the fulcrum anchoring it all down. When you see those radial cracks in the soil, it means the fulcrum is failing. Yeah, the roots on the windward side are snapping, or they're losing their friction against the soil, and they are literally lifting the dirt up as the whole structure begins to tip.
So, for everyone listening, this is the moment to permanently change how you inspect your yard. Like stop looking up at the leaves to gauge a tree's health.
Absolutely.
You have to inspect the base of the trunk and the soil around it. Because if that root system is pulling out of the ground, you have a massive structural vulnerability just waiting for an external force to exploit it.
And in Florida especially, those external forces are not subtle. A rotting root system is a vulnerability, sure, but extreme weather is what turns that vulnerability into a total disaster.
Okay, let's talk about the physics of that failure.
Yeah.
The source material specifically brings up the environmental factors in Palmetto, Florida, but obviously this applies to anyone living in a storm-prone area.
Right, anywhere with severe weather.
We are talking about extreme weather volatility here. We don't just get a little rain, we get torrential, ground-soaking deluges. And the guide paints this very specific picture of the sandy soils on Florida's west coast, particularly near Terracea Bay.
Yeah, that sandy soil is a huge factor.
Right, because when those sandy soils get hit with these deluges, the mechanics of the ground fundamentally change.
They do. The soil literally liquefies. The National Hurricane Center frequently warns about the impact of wind on saturated grounds. But, let's break down why that actually matters mechanically.
Please do, because it sounds crazy.
Well, normal dry soil has friction. The sand particles grind against each other and they grip the roots tightly. But when you get, say, 10 inches of rain in a tropical depression,
Which happens a lot.
all the time, water fills all the microscopic pore spaces between the sand grains, and suddenly the friction just disappears. The sand particles are essentially floating in water.
So the ground basically turns to soup.
Exactly. Soup.
And suddenly, that massive sail, the canopy is catching wind, pulling on a lever, and the fulcrum is resting in a bowl of soup.
Right. Now, a healthy tree with a deep, expansive root system, it can often flex and distribute that wind load even in saturated soil.
It has the strength to hold on.
Yeah. But a sick tree, a tree with root rot, or one that is already showing signs of root heaving, it has absolutely no mechanical strength left.
Right.
Add a 60-mile-per-hour wind gust to a saturated yard, and the tree doesn't just bend, it simply rips out of the earth.
Wow. And this circles back to a really dangerous instinct a lot of property owners have. Like you see a leaning tree, or maybe you notice a bit of soil cracking, and the immediate thought is, I'll just grab a pole saw, give it a quick haircut, remove some of the canopy weight, and it'll be fine.
Oh, the old give it a haircut strategy.
Exactly. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg. Because if the ground is liquefied and the roots are rotted, trimming a few branches is useless, isn't it?
Completely useless. Taking 10% off the top of the canopy does almost nothing to reduce the leverage pulling on a failing root system. Think of a tooth with a rotted root holding a massive, heavy crown.
Okay, ouch, but yes.
Right. The moment you bite down on something hard, or in this case, a 60-mile-per-hour wind hits the tree, the crown acts as a lever and simply rips the whole structure out of the jaw.
That is a visceral image.
It is, but it's accurate. A light pruning doesn't change the physics of a rotted fulcrum.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because as a homeowner, the resistance to calling a professional isn't always just about the money. Sometimes it's a feeling of false competence.
Oh, absolutely.
You see a heavy branch leaning ominously toward your bedroom window, you un a ladder, and you have your grandfather's old chainsaw in the garage. The fix seems so obvious and immediate.
You think, I can handle this.
Right. The temptation to just climb up there and snip the one problem branch is incredibly strong.
Yeah.
Why can't I just take care of it?
It is a strong temptation, but it stems from a complete misunderstanding of the physical forces trapped inside the wood. People look at a branch and just think about gravity.
Like it'll just fall straight down.
Exactly. They think, as long as I cut it so it falls away from me, I'm perfectly safe. But gravity is the least of your worries. You are completely forgetting about tension and compression.
Right, because wood is essentially a bundle of flexible fibers. If a massive branch is leaning heavily, the top of the branch is stretching out. That's tension, and the underside is compressing under all that weight.
Yes. So when you take a chainsaw to a limb that is under extreme load, it doesn't just passively drop.
It reacts.
Violently. If you cut it from the wrong angle, the release of that stored kinetic energy is explosive. The branch can split violently down the trunk. Loggers call it a barber chair phenomenon.
A barber chair.
Yeah, and the butt of the branch can kick back upward with enough force to shatter a jaw or just throw you clean off a ladder.
Oh my God. And the Occupational Safety and Health Administration consistently ranks tree care as one of the most hazardous jobs in the entire country for this exact reason. We vastly underestimate the weight of what we are dealing with. I read that a single section of a mature oak trunk can weigh over 1,000 pounds.
1,000 pounds of entirely unforgiving mass. And that's before we even talk about the environmental hazards.
What else is there?
Well, you have electrocution risks from hidden power lines running through the canopy. You have the instability of trying to operate a high-torque, vibrating chainsaw while balancing on an unsecured ladder.
Which is a recipe for disaster.
It really is. The equipment an average homeowner has in their garage is simply not engineered to manage the extreme dynamic loads of felling heavy timber.
So you try to save a few bucks, the branch kicks back, and you end up in the emergency room.
If you're lucky.
Right. But the nightmare doesn't stop at the hospital. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's not just about the physical danger. The financial reality of ignoring a dying tree or botching a DIY removal is staggering.
The insurance implications are a massive blind spot for almost everyone. People assume that because they have homeowners insurance, they're automatically covered if a tree falls on their roof.
Right, you think, I pay my premiums, I'm good.
And sure, if a perfectly healthy tree is ripped out of the ground by a freak, unpredictable tornado, your policy generally covers that damage. It is an act of nature. But the rules change the second negligence enters the chat.
Oh, wow. And the Florida Department of Financial Services is very clear on this. Homeowners have a strict legal duty to maintain their premises.
Absolutely. If an insurance adjuster comes out to inspect a massive hole in your living room roof, they don't just look at the damage to the house. They inspect the stump of the tree that fell.
They act like detectives.
They do. They are looking for those fungal conks we talked about. They're looking for advanced internal rot that has clearly been developing for years.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. If they determine that the tree was an obvious pre-existing hazard that you just ignored, they have every right to flatly deny your claim.
Because it wasn't an unavoidable act of nature. It was an inevitable structural failure that you chose to ignore for maybe 2 years. So instead of just paying a deductible, you were suddenly left entirely on the hook for a $30,000 roof repair bill out of pocket.
Exactly. Paying a professional tree removal service to dismantle a hazard before a storm hits isn't just a landscaping expense. It is quite literally the ultimate form of financial protection for your property.
Which naturally leads to the logistics of professional removal.
Yeah.
If a homeowner recognizes the signs, the root heaving, the fungal conks, and they know DIY is out of the question, what actually happens next?
They call the pros.
Right. And the guide from Tree Service Palmetto LFL talks about their process, and it's fascinating how different it is from just chopping at the base and yelling timber.
Oh, it's a completely different world.
So how does a professional crew actually dismantle a multi-ton palm tree in a tight residential space without crushing a driveway or a neighbor's fence?
Well, it is an exercise in applied physics. Professionals execute a plan based on structural engineering principles. They do not let gravity dictate what happens. They control the descent of every single piece of wood.
How do they do that?
They use complex rigging systems, utilizing friction devices to manage massive weights.
You mean like wrapping ropes around cylinders to create friction so the weight of the log doesn't just pull the worker up into the air?
Exactly that mechanism. Devices like a porter wrap allow a 150-pound arborist on the ground to safely lower a 1,000-pound log with just 2 fingers.
That is wild. 2 fingers.
Yeah, by utilizing the friction of the rope against a steel cylinder. Meanwhile, the climber up in the tree uses arborist blocks and specialized ropes that actually stretch to absorb the shock load when a massive piece of timber is cut.
Oh, so it doesn't jerk the tree.
Right. They dismantle the tree surgically, piece by piece, securing limbs and guiding them down so they never free fall onto your property.
So it's structural deconstruction, not just cutting.
Precisely.
The guide also breaks down some highly practical takeaways that homeowners always ask about.
Yeah.
First up is the cost. Standard removals in the Palmetto area usually range from $500 to $2,000. And that obviously scales based on the height of the tree, the proximity to structures, and the hazard level.
Right. And if the tree is completely dead and brittle, it might be too dangerous for a human to climb at all.
Oh, what do they do then?
At that point, the crew has to bring in a bucket truck or even a heavy crane to lift sections of the tree up and over a house. And that heavy machinery significantly increases the overhead, which is exactly why it is always cheaper to remove a declining tree before it becomes a completely dead, brittle hazard.
That makes total sense. And then there's the bureaucratic side,
Yeah.
local permits. Most municipalities, including the city of Palmetto, require a tree removal permit for anything exceeding a certain trunk diameter. You can't just clear-cut your yard.
True, but this is another major advantage of hiring a reputable professional service. Hazardous, dead, or structurally failing trees often qualify for expedited exemptions from the city. Yeah, the pros know the municipal code, they know the local arborists, and they navigate that whole permitting process for you.
That is a huge relief.
Yeah.
The guide also clarifies the insurance question from a preventative standpoint. People always ask, will my insurance pay to take down this dead tree before it falls on my house?
And the answer is almost universally no.
Right. Insurance pays for damage to covered structures. It rarely pays for preventative maintenance. It is on you, the homeowner, to mitigate the risk beforehand.
Always. And finally, there is the issue of the stump. When an arborist fells a tree, they cut the trunk as close to the ground as safely possible. But you are still left with a solid wooden stump anchored by the remaining root system.
Right, you can't just plant grass over it the next day and pretend it wasn't there.
Exactly. If you want a completely flush yard, you have to request stump grinding. This is a totally separate service that requires specialized heavy machinery with a massive spinning carbide-tipped wheel.
Sounds intense.
It is. It literally shreds the remaining wood and roots several inches below the grade of the soil, allowing you to fill it with dirt and restore the landscaping. It's a distinct mechanical process from the rigging and felling of the canopy.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive by uncovering the hidden biological decay, the fungi digesting the structural lignin of a tree long before the leaves ever turn brown.
The silent killers.
Right. We explore the violent mechanics of Florida storms, understanding how saturated liquefied soil turns a massive trunk into a lever that just rips its own failing roots out of the earth.
The soup.
The soup.
Huh.
We unpack the dangerous physics of tension and compression that make DIY chainsaw work a one-way trip to the emergency room, and the terrifying reality of an insurance adjuster denying a massive claim because you ignored an obvious hazard.
A costly mistake.
Extremely. And finally, we looked at the engineered, friction-based rigging that professionals use to surgically dismantle a threat. Investing in professional tree care isn't about having a tidy yard. It's about mitigating a multi-ton kinetic threat hanging directly over your roof.
It really requires a complete shift in perspective. We spend so much time thinking of landscaping as purely aesthetic, a way to make our properties look beautiful, a way to add curb appeal.
Sure, we all want a nice yard.
But considering the massive weights, the internal biology, and the sheer physical forces at play during a storm, what if we started viewing our yards through the lens of structural engineering?
Now that's interesting.
How would that change your relationship with the silent, towering natural structures standing right outside your bedroom window?
That is a brilliant framework to leave on. The plumbing might be working, but the framing could be failing. Look closely at the base, respect the physics, and please don't take chances with the chainsaw. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this conversation gives you a whole new way of looking at your yard and helps you stay safe out there.